dear friend of mine, he has a son, a wonderful son named Nicholas. I'm his goddaddy. And he just had to have this conversation with him the other day about how you conduct yourself when you are pulled over by the police, because the priority is for you to come home and for you to survive that situation. That same friend of mine once had his uncle killed, and his uncle was gunned down by an off-duty police officer who happened to be drunk on the job decades ago. Although it was decades ago, the interesting element of that story is what Jalen is alluding to, because in order for him to try to falsify the police report, he wanted to say he was beaten up and this guy was resisting arrest. So two officers took him into the back room and beat him to a pulp just so it could look like the person he shot, which was my best friend's uncle, was the one that beat him up, and that's why he got shot. So we hear about these kind of things. These are just one of the many, many stories that the African American community can disseminate to the masses about the kind of things that we endure. But in saying all of that, as we do this show, recognizing the sensitivity of the situation, recognizing that rogue cops need to be identified, they need to be called out, and oh, by the way, those good cops need to be the ones first in line to call them out instead of instead of putting forth that blue wall of silence. What I'm saying is, regardless of what we can't tell, unless we're prepared to sit up here and say most police officers are bad people, we got an obligation to say that most of them are not. Because there's black police officers, there's Hispanic police officers. You know, when you had Freddie Gray in Baltimore, there were some black police officers that were involved in that incident as well. All I'm trying to say is we're going to call out the people who deserve to be called out. We're going to bring attention to the people who deserve to be attention to. But we also have to recognize that most people in this country have no choice when they get in trouble but to dial 911. And if you got to dial 911, then you have to be mindful of the fact that there's still a hope and a belief that there are some good officers out there. Let's make sure to remind them that we need them to be every bit as good as we hope they truly, truly are.
Well, I think what's interesting about what you're saying, and one of my best friends in the whole world works for the Atlanta Police Department. My father was in the FBI for 27 years. So one thing I understand is public service and I understand law enforcement, but it didn't change the conversation that my dad had with my brother when it came to police. The one word he said is comply or die.
Yes.
Could you imagine sitting your son down and saying, if you do not comply, you could die? And then my brother turns 19. He's already been pulled over several times before, and a cop asks him if he can search the car. My brother complies so he doesn't die. He goes and searches his trunk, which, know your rights. You do not have to open your trunk or your glove compartment when a police officer comes to you. And he claims that he saw sticks and stems in the back. You know where they took my brother? Straight to jail. They didn't ask him any other questions. They were ready to charge him. My dad just happened to be home. Thank God he was off from Washington, D.C., from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He had a day off. And he walks up to that jail and he says, you guys have my son here. What happened? The police officer says he has some stems and sticks in the back and I'm not sure what they are. So we brought him in for questioning. And my dad said, before you say anything else, I'm an FBI agent. I'm a special agent. I've been here for 20 years. So what do you want to tell me? And the police officer said, why didn't he just tell me that he was the son of an FBI agent? What if my brother didn't have the privilege of having a father who worked for the government? He would have a rap sheet right now. And my dad told that officer, he was like, okay, I know that your job is to keep bad people off the street, but it's also your job to keep good kids out of the system. Our problem is good kids too often end up in the system. And then that's amplified by the videos we're having to watch of young black lives that are being taken from their sons, their daughters, their family. That could have been my brother. Comply or die. Comply or die. That is the only thing that we are able to tell our young black sons.